It's so nice to be here in your office with you. Tell me a little bit about how you got into the world of virtual reality.
Interesting question. Well, originally I started Project Whitecard not very long ago, 12 years ago, short amount of time in the big scheme of things. I decided that I was working, had quite a senior position in web development in Toronto. And I decided, the news is maybe not the most fun for me. And also, I don't think people are really, well, this is honestly true, smart enough, which is a bit vain. But what I wanted to do was make educational software. So I came back to Winnipeg with the idea to start a company called Project Whitecard, and founded that company, and we pursued solely educational projects. So anything that had to do with education, but mostly my dream was to work with NASA. And so I worked with the Canadian Space Agency and astronauts and with NASA. And after that, I started playing with the virtual reality and thought, wow, this is an incredible opportunity for education. So we started with the virtual reality. I got a preview from Chet Falazek from Valve, who was one of the leading advocates out of Seattle of the HTC Vive system. We actually used that in development. And once I saw a whale in VR, I was hooked. I was like, okay, I have to work on this because it's so immersive and so beautiful. So we've done a few projects in VR. The most notable would be that we were hired by Manitoba Public Insurance just last year to deliver a teen driving experience that includes a full vehicle that you can drive, but dramatic scenarios where you must make decisions about who you go home with from a party, and where you can see the results of maybe some bad decisions and how it affects people around you. So that was very great.
That one actually includes distracted driving decisions as well, right?
It does. It includes distracted driving and impaired driving and also speeding. So depending on which person you're at the party with, you will get one of those scenarios. And we designed it in such a way so that just like I'm looking at you, if you look at characters in virtual reality, they make eye contact with you, and that's how your decisions are made. So I decided that I would like to do another project, and I wanted to do something that was good for people. I like to try to use the technology to do good things, is the idea. So I saw that there was the possibility that virtual reality was good for people that are maybe older and maybe having some cognitive issues, to be determined. So I put a great deal of effort behind designing a business plan where we could try to address those issues, and created an entity called Project Whitecard Digital, and found it's amazing. Our first investors, who are Mark Evans and Paul Thiessen, were the first people we pitched, and we're like, we're in. So we got our investment the first time. As you know, that's pretty hard to get a pitch the first time around, but I met a good mentor in Greg Loader. And so we're creating this virtual world with beaches and an adventure, like a Cary Grant, Grace Kelly type adventure that takes you from place to place and allows you to drive virtual cars and drive boats and collect pictures. And we're building it based on the research that we have from a researcher right here in Manitoba. And we'll be announcing our research results at the time we go live sometime in the fall.
So where did the idea to build this vacation realm come from? Why did you decide on that?
That's also a very good question. So I'd seen what people were doing, and I was sort of drawn to the idea. It's really interesting. So, I mean, I was drawn to the idea, and I'm looking at the screen of a beach back there. And that's because I was drawn to the idea of a virtual reality beach. And at the same time that I created the beach in virtual reality, which is wonderful just to sit on the beach, we have very long winters here in Winnipeg. At the same time that I was developing that idea, I had been reading all the research and meeting the researchers and pursuing and writing the business plan. And it's really interesting because we started with one chair on the beach, and we came and took the research that said, okay, this hotel is a hotel at the beach. Now we're going to drive vehicles in a town called Juniper Beach, and we've called the town Juniper Beach as a bit of an homage, actually, to a Black Mirror episode that was done, which is extremely popular amongst millennials, which is called San Junipero. And it takes place in California. So we actually, from the single idea of sitting on the beach, which we did 18 months ago, the entire project sort of sprang up around this chair on the beach, and it became Juniper Beach as an homage. And we not only have Juniper Beach, we also have a Brady Gulch, which is a western town, and we have roads where people can drive between these towns in virtual reality. And we're trying to design everything so that it has efficacy for the kind of results that we're looking for, which is reduced anxiety, but also that it's very calming, and we're collecting all of those results that we'll publish along with the project.
And it's got everything involved in it. It's not just, going on the vacation and simply relaxing on the beach or driving a car, but you've also included romance into it. How does that come into play?
Well, because I was looking at my audience, I really do want to. It's kind of funny, but I really did want to design something that would speak to an audience, and I'm saying an older audience, but it could be a more sophisticated audience, because I actually think that the game will really appeal to a lot of people, and we've purposely set it. It's unclear whether it's the 60s or the 80s. Okay. And so if you think of the most romantic films from the golden age of Hollywood, which is what part of our audience will have seen, who do you think of? Grace Kelly, Cary Grant, sitting on the beach. Yeah. It's all in there. So we've actually developed something that's very healthy for people, which is sort of a murder mystery. And there's been something that's being stolen, and there's a murder mystery, and we have characters like that, so that it's a very romantic. You think of not only California, but of the French Riviera.
Very cool.
Thank you.
So you're putting all this together. How do the ideas come together as one? How do you make it a reality?
Well, that's a really good question. So I was a developer in Toronto for 5 years before coming here, and we executed a number of projects. So the first thing you have to do, of course, is have a business plan. But the components of a game project are pretty much the same. You have game design, which has to be done first, which is what is the experience going to be like, and you design what people can do. And I've learned through experience to try and keep that very tight. We have done very large projects around Mars, and game projects can run with budgets anywhere from $30 to $40 million. It is crazy. So, and much higher too. So what we do is we design just very much like a film. We write a script. We also write a design document. The design document tells you what to program. The script and the storyboards tell you what assets you have to make. So you have to make 3D assets, you have to design clothes, you have to design animations for people or do motion capture. You also have to capture voices and record all of the actors' lines. And then you have to come up with a mechanic that works. And usually what makes any game stand out from another game, if it's going to be successful, is if there's something that's new about it. Something that's different about the mechanic. And I hope we've hit upon a good one, which is we're building on our experience of like first person, just like we're looking at each other, and we decide to talk to each other, that we're building that into the project. We've also got a mechanic where you're given clues that you can go back on to look at, which are destinations in all of the worlds that make up the whole of Duville, which we've called the whole project, like Juniper Beach plus Brady Gulch plus Bigfoot Mountain.
When you're doing it, as you said a little bit earlier, it's an educational experience as well. It's not, it's not mind-numbing. You're going into this virtual reality and you're experiencing everything that you would on a regular vacation. But bringing in clues, is that the educational part of it that you're implementing?
Well, bringing in clues hopefully makes it more fun. The educational part, or the serious part, is the fact, the entire gestalt, if you will, is that we're trying to make something that will leave you better off after playing it than you were going into it. And we know from early research that there's indicators that you can actually be in a better state of mind if you design things a certain way. So with this particular project, and I'm being a little bit vague on purpose because I can't claim anything, but we do have early research that indicates you could actually possibly get healthier, but we're not claiming that until we actually publish the research results. Healthier in the mind. So I'll just give you an example. So you may not know this, but the fact that if, for example, you were to go up in a hot air balloon and then you see very far away, you see that there's a white limousine. Oh, that's the white limousine I need to find. Once you land on the ground, how are you finding that white limousine, right? So suppose it's over there down by the river and you're in a virtual reality world. I've landed on the ground, I have to find it. Well, you're actually having to use your vestibular system, So virtual reality is perfectly suited because you're looking at everything by moving your head of navigating in a 3D world. So what we are beginning to do very, very shortly, and we had the researchers here today as we're doing a clinical trial, where we will test if any effects might be long-lasting, be it the stress relief, but hopefully that the way that we're allowing people to walk around and navigate will actually give you better peace of mind.
Amazing.
That's
And
what we're hoping for.
And not only that, but you're getting the physicality. You're not just sitting in a chair playing with a controller. You are actually moving around. How would you explain the difference in virtual reality now from years and years ago when
from years and years ago. Well, that's really interesting and a very good question. So years and years ago, virtual reality, as conceived by people like Jaron Lanier, I hope I got his name correct, at MIT. They had a game people probably remember if they were around in the 90s. They had a demo that would go around, which was a vector-based pterodactyl game and a shooting game. The real problem with virtual reality from long ago is their computers were nowhere near good enough to give you that experience. So what the creator of Oculus, the original creator, did, Palmer Luckey, is that he had put together a bunch of components so that you started getting, and called it Oculus Rift, so that and the story is quite impressive because Facebook ended up buying it. Put it together a bunch of components so that your latency was lower, and that, of course, now in modern games you have textures on things, you can see things, it's not made with lines. And because virtual reality tracks your headspace and also gives you a left view and a right view, and more innovations are to come, you need a very fast computer to do that. But the technology to make virtual reality very, very good is becoming much more inexpensive very, very quickly. This year has already seen the introduction of the Oculus Go by the same team. To give you an idea, a year ago, to have a good VR experience, you spend probably about $2,400. You need a really expensive computer. I'm going to point at these things hanging on the ceiling, even though you can't see them in the camera. These are lasers, infrared lasers, to do head tracking. And it's very expensive, and you need all that to get the latency down. So this year alone, you've already got something called the Oculus Go, which anybody will be able to afford. $200 US, $280 Canadian. You can get a really good VR experience. I think we have an Oculus Go around here. I have to show you one. This Vive is also a VR system. It's sitting behind us. That's one of the expensive ones. The Oculus Go is self-contained. So last year, even with a Samsung Gear, for example, you'd have to slide a phone into it. Right. And your phone is worth at least $500. And so you've still got a very expensive entry level into Oculus. This week, Oculus and I believe it's called Next VR, they're introducing a number of live sporting events across all of the systems, including the Vive. In virtual reality, it's great. It's video. It's like immersive. You can be at a live sports event. They're also introducing social aspects to that, where if you had the same unit that I do, I can see you and we're watching the same game, and we can talk to each other while we're watching a live game, which is really interesting innovation. but the price is just coming right down. So the biggest thing about virtual reality now versus years ago is that we now have computers that are powerful enough to display it, and that's where this latest revolution came from. But we're now having mobile systems that are going to be good enough to display it. There's a brand new Vive mobile system coming out, as well as about 3 or 4 other brands. So we have to have the eyeballs, like your world, so that we can have a big enough audience to sell to. And what's great about having a $200 unit is that if I build a piece of software that's interesting enough for somebody, they could decide to buy the whole thing, the VR unit, right, and not need a huge computer system, not need to operate it. They could just have it arrives in the mail and put it right on their head. So it's like, okay, so this is a good time to deliver that experience to people.
Now, I'm excited about this project in itself. It sounds exciting. It's something that I would want to give a try, just to see what it's like.
Sure.
But I don't want to leave my viewers hanging on the fact that you worked with NASA.
Oh.
You got to tell me a bit about that. It's a dream come true for you.
Yes.
But how does that even happen? How does that come together?
Well, yeah, let's tell your viewers. So, like all good things in life, you have to first want it, and then you have to visualize it very, very well, as I'm sure you do all the time. And then you need a plan. So I wanted to work with NASA and but also Canadian Space Agency. So my story really starts with when I left a large network in Toronto to come to Winnipeg to start my company. I literally had a 20-step plan, and it's like if you want to follow your dreams, you can't be shy about it. So I picked up the phone and called the Canadian Space Agency, and I said, I really want to make a game about the Apollo moon missions, and I thought I would call you. And they said, that's a really good idea, Khal. I'll get back to you. So I started working on this Apollo mission game, which actually we released, and that's already like 10 years ago. But they called me back. And a year later and said, Khal, there's an RFP, which is a request for proposal. You probably want to apply for it. So when we saw the request for proposal, which was to do a project with Julie Payette, it turned out, we all hands on deck. There's usually just 5 of us here. We built a prototype and we competed, and then we won that project. Enthusiasm goes a really long way. After we won that, NASA had a similar competition to do a number of things. And in that process, which is still not complete, I don't consider my work on the project that was made in collaboration with NASA complete. That project had a number of milestones, worked on an interactive with the Curiosity mission. When I proposed my ideas and competed in the United States and California, I won a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation grant. And a MacArthur Foundation grant, and at that point I was like, okay, Mom and Dad, look what I did. Yeah. MacArthur Foundation grant, how awesome. And then I was able to also compete to win funding I won funding, I'll say funding, just to be able to pursue your dreams, you need to have a team when you're doing something like this. So we were funded, of course, to build those projects for the Canadian Space Agency, and then self-funded to produce projects around NASA-themed ideas. And we've created a number of those, and some of them are not launched yet. Some of them exist. We have a virtual reality astronaut experience, which I hope we can pursue, which is beautiful. And I focused all of my time on, well, what's the one project? I've done the NASA done the Canadian Space Agency, work with Chris Hadfield. So what's next? Well, this one, to create a virtual world, I realized is very, very fun. It's like to sort of have some 80s, 60s fantasies in there and make something that's healthy for people, hopefully. Seemed a very worthwhile use of my time. And it turns out, one of the rules going from the very beginning of starting my own enterprise is to think about what's good for everybody. Because people can get on board with that. And, not say, it's good for me, so I'm going to pursue that. Oh, the voice came in. We were doing voice acting today. That's how my friend talks, Paul Olenek. So we did the project and in NASA, and then the next project is this Alzheimer's project because it's like what's good for the collective, and people really respond. Like I remember when I was like, we're not doing anything to do with guns. Now I love to play games like that, but right from the beginning, it's like no guns. Had enough of it covering the news. I'm done with that.
It also makes you stand out.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many people respond to that. So it's like, oh, Khal, you want to come to Paris with us this week? And things like that would happen. Do you want to come down to NASA Ames Research Center, have a tour, see the shuttle simulator? Yeah. So people will encourage you if you really are pursuing something that's good for people. And so to be in the right mindset and then to visualize really well, you find that things start happening. And hopefully you get better at it. This project, and a lot of it is due to the personalities of the investors, of course, Paul Thiessen and Mark Evans. This particular project, we didn't pitch it for longer than several days because they were the first people we met, and they're like, we're on board. So that's good. That means to me, that there's some progress there. I hope I don't have to spend as much time pitching projects as I did in the past because some of the projects would take maybe 8 or 9 or 10 pitches over the course of 3 or 4 years, which is a lot of work, you know.
Because it's not only are you pitching your idea, but for everybody that says no, it's got to chip away at you a little bit.
Yeah, it chips away at you a little bit, and you can lose control of the idea if you talk to too many people. So it's very similar, I'm sure, to what people go through in Hollywood. It's like showbiz in a way because. But those projects take a long time too. Sometimes they just take a long time. And I have, I still pursue some of the projects in the background. I've been asked to consult on a number of science documentaries and spoke in San Francisco. Even I was invited down to San Francisco in November and spoke there on the BBC panel, which is amazing to me. But yeah, just sort of keeping the eye on what's the goal and keeping your vision. And then once you've picked a project, it's important to focus on it. And then everything can happen. I mean, I would love to, after this project, to actually build spaceships. So we'll see how I do with that one. Yeah, that would be okay.
And you've done TED Talks as well.
I have. I did a TED Talk, TEDx Winnipeg. I gave a talk on what a future classroom would look like. And a future classroom probably looks very similar to my office because it's filled with virtual reality, and there's people on the bridge, and that's my TEDx talk.
Very cool. Now I have to ask. We've talked a little bit about Toronto and how you were there. Vancouver is huge for the video gaming industry.
It is.
I want to know why Winnipeg. I personally love Winnipeg, but why did you decide to stick it out here?
Well, I do have roots in Winnipeg. I grew up in Winnipeg. I have siblings that live here. Most of my siblings live in Winnipeg. Winnipeg is also, I think what's interesting about, so in all honesty, so I went to Toronto. Now, Toronto is a little bit like a black hole. So you go to Toronto, you're one of thousands of people. Right? It's hard to get clarity whether your idea is your idea. It's hard to explain that. I loved my experience working in that large public network in Toronto, but I never really felt unique. I felt that I was only really unique when I came to Winnipeg because there's not really still a lot of people doing what I do here. And it is a breath of fresh air. Just like I'm here on Corydon in Corydon Village, and we have a view of the best part of the city. And this has been my office for over 5 years now. And it's really easy to think here. You know, you don't actually get space to think, as much space to think in a larger place. That might change, but that was certainly the case with me, is that, my thoughts about Toronto took me to Toronto. When I finished those projects, and I came back to Winnipeg, I had more bigger thoughts. And I did get a lot of clarity. I often teach at the University of Winnipeg. I'm teaching this fall, and I teach programming. And the University of Winnipeg, both the regular programs, but also the continuing educational program there, is continuously producing graduates that I taught, and I continuously hire them, so that's also very good. And the University of Manitoba collaborations that I currently have are also excellent. And I think there's just well, as you know, I think everybody knows now, there's a really good energy in Winnipeg. I always knew that, but now everybody knows due to how far the Jets got this year. Yeah.
It definitely helps out, and it's just one of those cities that there's a ton of talent in it, and
Yes.
there's so much room to go with that.
It's true, and I mean, Winnipeg has an excellent tax credit, which is really important if you're in production. It's 40% on your employment, and that's, what's a tax credit? Well, a tax credit, when you spend $100,000 on your employees, is $40,000. That really helps you stretch. And I had a cohort, if you will, of very talented people, if I might say so, including Tom Kaminsky and Noah Dector-Jackson, who's very heavily involved in creating video games. And we went through, Winnipeg created an incubator for us. I was like, I want to make a game. And suddenly there was a contest. And I entered the contest within a year of being back here and won the contest. And they actually got us in an office and put us all, gave us all computers and said, go build your game. So I was building Project Moonwalk, the Apollo project. So Winnipeg has people like Ed Suzuki in it. I know we're up for most intelligent. We're one of the finalists for the most intelligent community in the world. They'll be voting on it at the beginning of June in London. So anybody from Winnipeg who wants to go to London, your conference, by the way, cost is written off on the Intelligent Communities Conference, but that's an initiative that Economic Development Winnipeg worked on. World Trade Center in Winnipeg with Mariette Muller, who's wonderful. You should interview her sometime, and all of those people there at WTC are great business associates, and they've taken me to Europe many times. I've been to Paris and Belgium and other parts of France and London on the way back. Those are all people that are in Winnipeg. And if you start a business in Winnipeg, you will meet all these people and you will travel and you will become enlightened about the ways of the world. It's very, very fun. And I don't know if that's necessarily the case in a city where there's too much competition. Is that fair to say? You don't really stand out. I stand out here. I'm not sure if I stood out in Toronto as much as I wanted to.
I totally get it. I love it. There you go. Juniper Beach, when it is launched,
yes,
how do people get their hands on it?
Oh, very good question. So right now you can go to digital.projectwhitecard.com and we have a contact form. We'll put you on a mailing list. Juniper Beach will be part of a project that we will test very soon on the Oculus platform and on Steam, and it'll be called Douville, like Douville, and you'll see that on the website I gave you. And Juniper Beach is part of that project, so people will be able to download it. And if people want to test the project, please send me an email that you want to test it. I can add you to our beta testers group, so no problemo. So we can do about 100 people there, and you can give us early feedback. That's no problem.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I'll give it to your audience. How's that? Yes.
One more question.
Yes.
I try to ask each of my guests. You wore the Strombo suit.
I did.
How about the socks?
Oh, no socks.
No socks.
Yeah. Huh. No socks, a little bit cooler. And then I've got I think this is the trend next year, I've got my platform patent leather shoes on too.
I do like the shoes. They are very nice.
No socks today.
Why no socks?
I think that's the current cool thing to do is no socks. So that's what I do, no socks. But I do have fancy socks as well, but I find this nice in the summertime.
It kind of cools you off a little bit, hey?
Yeah.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. What an excellent interview you did. The best one I've ever done, really.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.